This morning, I'd like to talk about a story in the Old Testament. This story I call Elijah, the Cave, and a Great Lesson. This is found in the book of 1 Kings. Most of it will be toward the end of chapter 18 and in chapter 19. We'll be doing some selective readings from there, but we won't be reading the whole thing. But this story is about Elijah and what he was called to do and how he perceived what was happening to him and what his response to that perception and God's response to him. But before we get started, let me give you a little background on this. King Ahab was the king of Israel. Among many of his bad decisions, one of the worst is he married Jezebel. Jezebel liked to worship Baal. And through her influence, Israel also began to worship Baal. Not only were they worshiping Baal, but Jezebel thought it was a good idea, let's round up the prophets of God and kill them. Now, Obadiah hid a bunch of the prophets, but she still got to some of them. As Obadiah is going along hiding them, he runs across Elijah. And he tells Elijah what's been going on. Now, during this time, because of their misbehavior, God has caused a drought to be on the land. So, Obadiah lets Elijah know, they're killing the prophets. I've hit a few of them, but they're out there killing all of God's prophets. And they're worshiping Baal. So Elijah says, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go back and you get everybody rounded up and take them up to Mount Carmel, and I'll meet you there. So he does. Elijah gets to Mount Carmel, and here comes the crowd along with 450 prophets of Baal. He says, okay, I'm tired of this wishy-washy bit. You're worshiping God, you're worshiping Baal. You're worshiping God, you're worshiping Baal. It's time to settle the issue right here and right now. What we're going to do is we're going to have a little test. We're going to put 2 bowls cut up in pieces on wood piles. And whichever God can consume that by themselves without us helping, you'll know they're God. The crowd said, okay, that sounds fair. He says, I'm going to even go the extra mile. You prophets of Baal, you can make your pick of whichever bowl you want. That way there's no shenanigans going on. So they picked a bowl and they cut them up into pieces. They built a pile of wood and they put their pieces on top of the wood. And they started in the morning and they started their chanting and praising and dancing around and all of that. And no fire came. It was about noontime now. They were getting tired, but there was still no fire. Elijah decides he's going to mock him a little bit. So where's your God? Maybe you need to be louder. Maybe he's just off somewhere. He's traveling. He can't hear you. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe you need to wake him up. As they dance and they chant even harder, they start cutting themselves, which was part of the practice. And they're bleeding all over the place, and they're chanting, and there is no fire. And their time finally runs out with no fire. Elijah says, okay, my turn. He takes the altar that they had torn down and he puts it back, stacks the rocks back up, puts the wood on top of the altar, takes the cut pieces, puts it on the wood, and then digs a trench all the way around that altar. He says, now, we're going to make it a little bit harder. I want you to fill up 4 jars of water. And I want you to pour it all over the bowls, pieces, and all over the wood. So they did. He says, now do it again. So they did it a second time. He says, all right, I'll tell you what, do it a third time. So again, they filled up 4 jars of water and poured it all over. This is now so much water, it has run off and filled up the moat that he has dug around the altar. And he now turns to God and asks him to bring down fire. Not only did he bring down fire that consumed the bowl, consumed the wood, it burned the rock, it burned the dust, and it dried up all the water that was in the trough that he had dug around the altar. The people said, whoa, this is God. Elijah's going, yeah, I got him. Now, I want you to round up all 450 of those prophets, and then he killed all 450 of those prophets with the sword. And he had won Israel. So he thought. And that's where our story picks up. Because it turns out it wasn't the way he thought it was. And he fell into fear and despair. Take a look at 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 2 through 4. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and more also if I don't make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servants there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Jezebel found out about this because when they went back, Ahab told her all that had happened. She was furious. So she sent a messenger to Elijah going, guess what? By this time tomorrow, I'm going to kill you by the sword too. Well, this was a bit of a shock to Elijah's system. He thought he had won the day. But instead, the government of Israel turned on him and were going to kill him. He became afraid and he ran. And he ran for a day's journey, and then he left his servants and then ran on even farther, finding a broom tree, which is over in Israel is a very bushy type of tree. Very low, but it kind of goes over the top, maybe there's about 4 feet or so of clearance underneath with lots of shade. And he finally just got underneath one of those broom trees and he collapsed. And he was in such despair, he's going, just take my life. They killed my fathers, the prophets, and now they're going to kill me. I'm no better off than they were. In his mind, he had lost. He made this great show. God made this great show. And he couldn't convince Israel. They turned on him. There's nothing left to do but die. It's all over. We often feel that same fear and despair today. In the book of John, chapter 14, verse 27, it says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. But things happen in our lives that cause us great fear and despair. Maybe it's the health of a loved one or a financial crisis. Or maybe a job that's hanging by a thread. Or maybe it's a job that's gone away. And we spend, instead of sleeping, staring at the ceiling, thinking, what am I going to do now? What's in store for me tomorrow? Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. Now what do I do? Since we had this COVID virus, people have lost their jobs because of the shutdown. And the statistics came out showing that the number of suicides has greatly increased. Why? Because of fear and despair. They think they have no way out. There's nothing left for them. It's all over. So I think we can understand where Elijah was coming from. He wasn't just feeling sorry for himself. In his mind, his world had come crumbling down. But see, God understands that. And he understood that Elijah was feeling this way. And because of his compassion for Elijah, he didn't just leave him on his own. In the book of 1 Kings now, chapter 19, verses 5 through 8. And he lay down and slept under the broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank, and he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. Elijah's feeling horrible. He's at the end. Take my life. And the angel, by God's direction, says, you need to eat and drink because your job's not done yet. I've got more for you to do. I've got a journey for you to take. Sometimes that's all we need, is to realize that we have purpose in this life. And it gives us hope. That we are here to serve God, not to be great moguls. And all we have to do is go to him in prayer for that comfort. In the book of Psalms, chapter 55, verse 22, cast your burdens on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. That's all we have to do when things are feeling like they're closing in all around us and we've got nowhere left to go. Turn to God. Turn to God in prayer. Because I assure you, I don't care how old you are. I can assure you, I don't care how young you are. God has work for you to do. He's not done with you yet. But you have to be willing. You have to get up like Elijah and walk those 40 miles to Mount Horeb. You have to put in the effort. It's not just going to come to you. You have to put in the effort. You have to break a sweat to do what God has intended for you to do, to fulfill your purpose. Because as long as you have purpose, you have hope. Elijah, though, still wasn't all the way there. He was feeling quite alone. I can imagine him making this statement, if I'm not the only one, then why do I feel so all alone? Let's go back to our text in 1 Kings chapter 19, now verses 9 through 10. He made that 40-mile trek to Mount Horeb. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. He's still hiding. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away. Sometimes we feel that same way. Is it nobody else? Is it just me? I've got nobody I can turn to. I've got no help. In the book of Psalms, chapter 25, verses 16 through 19, David felt the same way. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distress. Consider my affliction and my troubles, and forgive all my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and with what violent hatred they hate me. Especially with everything going on nowadays, we can feel like nobody cares. We can feel like I'm on my own. And I've got so many troubles, I can't bear them. I love what he says, the troubles of my heart are enlarged. Sometimes our troubles seem to us bigger than they really are. They become enlarged. There were many times that I was unemployed, sometimes by my own choice, sometimes not. And I would worry. My troubles would become enlarged, but I would forget who's taking care of me. The last time, I was trying to work for a water purifying company. I tried one, the owner was very belligerent to Christians. So I tried some others. I couldn't sell a single one. I was a good salesman. They're not buying a thing from me. I don't get it. And I was in despair. I had no money coming in. The only money we had to live on is what my wife could make. Tell you, at times I was feeling all alone. But God was taking care of me. Some friends of ours who go to the Valley congregation said, oh, by the way, there's an opening at the University of Phoenix. Why don't you go apply there? Okay, I didn't know what I was applying for, but what the heck. And I got the job. And 13 and a half years later, I retired from that job. And I made a good income there. I made a good living there. God took very good care of me, very good care of my family during this time. See, sometimes we build these problems up to be so large, we think they're bigger than they really are. When just around the corner, God has something even better for us. We just have to trust in Him. God showed Elijah he wasn't alone. Let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 19, now verses 15 through 16. He said, and the Lord said to him, go return to your way on the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive there, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and I'm going to skip that one. You shall anoint to be prophet in your place. Now they were told to go out and kill all of the Israelites who were worshiping Baal. But in verse 18 he said, yet they will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that had not kissed him. Elijah thought he was all alone. Israel had turned to Baal. He had failed. But no. There was Syria. And he was to anoint the king there and put a new king in place, Jehu, over Israel. And there were 7,000 still faithful. Excuse me. He wasn't alone. There were still 7,000 more people there. Brothers and sisters, I want you to realize you are not alone. Anytime you need help, I can almost guarantee, now I'm maybe speaking out of place, but I'm going to guarantee that if you call anybody in this room for help, they will either help you or they will call somebody who can help you, and you will get the help you need. You are never alone. If you need prayers, because things are so tough, we will pray for you. We have an invitation at the end just for that purpose, so that we can pray for you as a group to help you know you are not alone. But you know, it's bigger than that. So much bigger than that. I got these numbers from 2008. In 2008, there were about 2 million members of the Church of Christ and over 40,000 individual congregations worldwide. There were about 13,000 congregations here in the United States. 13,000 spread out over 50 states. That's a lot of congregations. Wherever you are never alone. Excuse me, my voice has gotten a little dry. We sing the song that I still get teased about the fact when we left Bakersfield, I sang the song and cried through the whole song, where no one stands alone. You realize that? Wherever you are, whatever military base you guys are assigned to, there is a congregation close by somewhere. You are never alone. I know sometimes it feels like you are. Juan and I are getting ready to go on a trip. First thing I did was look at Rapid City to see where if there was a congregation there. Sure enough, there was. Even though I'm going to be in South Dakota, I'm not alone. Tad, Daryl, any of these men who've traveled at all extensively can tell you wherever they have gone, they've been able to find a congregation. We are by no means alone. And they will all be just as helpful and just as loving, because as Christians, that's what we do. We love one another from the heart fervently. And we look for ways to do good, to help. That was only the first part of the lesson for Elijah, to let him know he wasn't alone. But the second lesson was even bigger. Be not dismayed, for God is with us. Even if we were all alone, that would be enough for me. I love this section of it. I'm going to tell you right now, this is my understanding of what is going on. And I encourage everyone to read this, study it for themselves. And if you come up with something different, please let me know. I'd love to discuss it with you, because to me, this is such a fascinating set of incidents that happened next. Elijah was found in the cave. God says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm feeling all alone. There's nobody left but me, and they're trying to kill me." Verses 11 and 12. God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke into pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. God is trying to tell him, in all of this craziness that you're feeling right now, dealing with the drought, dealing with Baal, dealing with Jezebel and the Israelites who are trying to kill you, it may feel like the wind is blowing things apart. And the mountains of your life are crumbling. Excuse me. It may feel like your earth is being shook to its very core. That you are standing in the fire. But God is not in any of these. These are not the works of God. If you want to find God, listen to that low, small whisper. Peter ran into the same thing. We were studying about this a couple Wednesdays ago. In Matthew chapter 14, verses 28 through 30, if you'll remember, those in my class will remember, but if you weren't there, Jesus had just heard about the death of John the Baptist and he wanted to be alone, so he got in a boat and crossed over the lake of Gennesaret to the other side. But when he got there were thousands of people waiting for him. And he had compassion on them, and he healed them, and he talked with them. And he fed them with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And he sent his disciples along on their way. He dismissed the crowd so they'd go away. And then he finally got his quiet time up on the mountain. But as the disciples were going across the lake to the other side, they ran into a storm. They weren't making much headway. So Jesus, when he's done, gets down and walks across the water out to the boat over this stormy sea. When the disciples see him, they think, look, here comes a ghost. Because it's floating across the water. It's understandable. But Jesus says, it's not a ghost, it's me. Peter says, verse 28, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Jesus says, come. So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water. I want you to make note of that. Sometimes we miss that. Peter got out of the boat and Peter walked on the water. Verse 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And he began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. It's what happens when we get distracted by what's going on in the world. And we forget who cares for us. And we forget who is there for us. And we begin to think we have to face it alone. Peter looked at the turmoil around him. And he forgot who he was walking to. And what he could do. And he began to sink. That's kind of who we are. We get wrapped up in all this and we lose track of who's in charge, of who controls all of this. In the book of Psalms, chapter 46, verses 9 through 11, David wrote this. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. What he's saying here is, don't worry about all the things that are going on. Remember, I'm in charge. I'm in control. I can end this anytime. And I will. But I'm not going to tell you when. So just have faith and trust in me. Listen to the whisper. God says, be still and know that I am God. I'm in control. Don't worry about it. Trust me. When we hear of rioting and fighting in the streets and people being shot and people being beat up and pulled out of cars, don't get wrapped up in it. Listen to the whisper. Be still and know that I am God. When it seems like everything around us is falling apart, we have the COVID virus. It's killing jobs. It's killing people. It's scaring us to death because we don't know where it's coming from and how we're going to get it and if we're going to die. Stop. Listen for the whisper. Be still and know that I am God. When we hear about churches being stopped, being closed by the states, fortunately we're in one that's not doing that, but there are states who are trying to close down the church. Shut off worship, make Christianity basically illegal. And we wonder what's next. Is it coming for us? What do we do? Stop. Listen for the whisper. Be still and know that I am God. I am in control. You just obey me. You just follow me, and it will all work out. God told us in Hebrews that I will never leave you nor forsake you. Believe it. Listen to that whisper. Be still and know that I am God. That's the story of Elijah, a cave, and a great lesson as I see it. I hope you'll look at the story, study it for yourself. Let me know what lessons you find in there for us. I think this is just a wonderful example, a beautiful example of God in control and helping us understand that when we feel like all is lost. Because we are never alone. We have each other, but more importantly, we have God.